We're going to be on the streamer. We're going to go live here. We're going to do a simulcast for you so you can get on www.kuhsdenver.com and actually check out the streamer live. We want you to be able to see us, and if you cannot, if you're in other parts of the world, remember you got to stay tuned just to the radio part, which is okay with us because we like delivering the word, whether it be audio or audio visual. So remember to stay tuned to us because we're going to have a good time. Today we have a very special guest in the house, Mr. Phil Ross. Phil Ross has a book out with, it's called Once a Trojan, Always a Trojan, a true story. And we're going to go ahead and get in depth with uh, Mr. Phil Ross. And if you guys are out there and you're watching live, which you probably can do, you can see this. This is his book. It's available on Amazon, and remember that you can, purchase it there. So we're going to get busy with Phil as I get to giving him questions and asking him all about himself. So he's going to get up there and talk to you about all what he's done, how he started, what he's been doing.
Thank you for having me, Henry.
So let's talk to you further about Phil. You're a writer. You've done a lot of things. Kind of give us a history about what you've done.
Well, Henry, I have 30 years plus experience as a editor and reporter on daily newspapers, all dailies, no weekly, all over 4 different states: Colorado, before that Texas, Nevada, and I started out in California where I grew up, went to high school in Orange County, and a lot of that has to do with the genesis of this book that we'll talk about.
It's an excellent book. I mean, I barely got to brief the preface, and me and you hooked up on LinkedIn, which is an absolute, excellent professional site for social networking as well as professional networking, and that's where I found you. So we linked up, we looked at each other's profiles, and we fit each other's profiles so we can be linked into professional advice with whatever. And then I seen that you're a book writer, and of course we've got this show to get you on here, so I thought I'd invite you here. So this is going to be nice to talk to you further. Now, one thing I wanted to touch on right away was that you were a sports writer.
Yes. I was not only a sports writer, however, I also did a lot of editing, editorial page editor in El Paso, Texas, one of the newspapers I worked on. In fact, the newspaper I worked on the longest period of time, 3 different times actually, Henry, was the El Paso Times, which was a Gannett paper. They're the people that up until recently owned the Fort Collins, Colorado newspaper, and KUSA was their big property here in Colorado. So I got to know the Gannett system pretty well. The only time I won a national award for something was something I did on atomic testing veterans in El Paso. They were people who were exposed to radiation in the 50s and 60s, and they kind of got caught up in kind of a syndrome. None of them knew each other. But
this is really interesting, Phil. I mean, you're a veteran. Let's talk about your veteran past and all the things. I mean, everything goes hand in hand with you, and you know that you've done this, you've done that. It's called experience, of course, and you get a lot of wisdom on top of it. So it's really interesting that we have this part of you that you want to discuss. Let's talk about your veteran past and what you've done and what area of the country you were in, or if you went around the world. Where have you been?
I was actually sent to Korea during the Vietnam era, which encompasses from 1960 to 1975. And I was a draftee in 1966. And not knowing any better, I didn't know that you could get drafted into the Navy, the Air Force, the Army, the Marines, or even the Coast Guard. The only one you couldn't get drafted into was the Merchant Marine.
Oh my God.
So the day I got drafted, they told 800 of us that we're going in the Army. They weren't drafting anybody in the Air Force that day, but they were drafting people in the Navy and the Marines. And the guys they drafted in the Marines that same day looked like they were going off to a death march because most of the Marines got sent to Vietnam as infantry guys, like in the Army. I became a postal clerk in Korea for 13 months. That was the regular tour in Korea. That's South Korea, of course.
Right.
Never been
and right now, if you're barely joining us, you got on late. You're listening to Phil Ross his book, What's a Trojan? Always a Trojan. We're going to get into that here shortly. But we got to give you a feel for Phil before we get him started. You got to know who he is and who you're talking to. You're on www.kuhsdenver.com. You can get on there and stream us live. Remember to turn down the audio part of the radio so you can catch the audio and visual of our TV streaming. So remember, it's right to the right side. It's visual. You can see it. Turn off the audio part of the radio. For those in other countries, keep the radio going because the video stream is not allowed in certain areas of the world. That's just the way it comes. So remember, we're UHS World Communications. We're sitting down right here with Phil Ross, and Once a Trojan, Always a Trojan. He's got just an awesome book, The Life of Joe Obama. Is that the way I pronounce it?
Obama, actually.
Obama.
It's a Dutch name.
A Dutch name.
Joe is actually, on his father's side, all Dutch.
Now, he's
But
a
his mother's
teammate.
side was Native American and Irish.
Right. He was a teammate of who else?
O.J. Simpson and
O.J.
7 other
Simpson.
first-round NFL draft picks.
Now, we're dialing it back to 1967. Is that correct?
1967, yes.
Okay, so let's go ahead and start with, because this was a kind of a book that you wrote, a Forrest Gump-like book of how that movie actually transpired. And your book kind of resembles the same type of storyline that the Forrest Gump movie had. So let's get started. How did you decide what compelled you to go ahead and write this book?
A good friend of mine named Marvin Tink Hahn. Tink was his nickname. Everybody knew him as Tink, but his name was Marvin or Marv Hahn. He went to high school with me, played on a Junior Rose Bowl championship team in 1965, right before I got drafted when we were both going to Fullerton Junior College. And he was the best friend of Joe Obama. Joe Obama lived in Buena Park, 3 miles from where I lived when I went to high school.
Okay, the story stage is set during the championship season of USC, right?
Mhm.
Right. And what transpired? What is it that is in the book that made this so compelling and revealing for all these individuals attending this school?
I resisted writing the story at first because I told Han, I said, "You're just BSing me. You're telling me a bunch of stuff." He says, "No, you saw Obama play when he was a senior at Mater Dei High School and he scored 19 touchdowns." I said, "Yeah." I didn't know him though personally, even though we only lived 3 miles away in Buena Park. I went to public school. He went to parochial school, and he told me, "You gotta interview him. You gotta interview him." I said, "Look, I'm working. I had a workaday life until 2009, Henry, and when I actually retired, I had more time to start writing books. So this book grew from 2010 basically to 2012, and eventually got published at the end of 2013.
And it's a good book. It's firsthand interviews with. Did you go out and actually get a hold of everybody that you possibly could do some firsthand interviews, or
Yes.
how did you grab so much data and compile it and then make a real life story to really match the real life experiences that everybody was.
I got to give credit to Joe Obama first because
Oh, sure.
this guy has an incredible Rolodex. He knows 15 or 17 former head coaches in the NFL.
Yeah, like
Some are
the
dead, some
USC
are alive.
was, the way they ran their program was a lot different than
Uh-huh.
they run it today. So back then, they would allow a lot of things to, take place as opposed to nowadays, stuff doesn't take place like it did back then. So that's why there was a lot of more fame, I think, for USC as there is today. I mean, they do things completely different nowadays.
The NCAA, I even make a reference to The Blind Side. If you've ever seen the book or read the book or seen the movie The Blind Side, the NCAA doesn't come across very well. They're very overbearing and stuff. Back in those days, they also had a different way of being overbearing. Joe Obama got recruited and got a full scholarship like his teammates to play at USC. They were the cream of the crop players from around the country.
Okay, now you say on this book, I mean, you see the book by Phil Ross, available at Amazon. You see the book. Now, in the book, Phil, kind of, we talked about the word digress. Let's digress into it. Let's have some fun. Tell us more about the book. What does it spell out? What's the storyline? Come on, give us some info.
Okay, one thing Joe Obama will tell you if he were here instead of me is that, and he has a really deep voice like this. He should have gone into broadcasting, and he regrets that now. But I'll do my regular voice for the rest of this interview. Joe does not like the Forrest Gump reference because he says I'm a real guy. He
Yeah, that was
wasn't.
like more make believe, right?
Right.
Forrest, everybody
And
knows
he,
this
and
Forrest
none of
Gump
this was make believe.
yeah.
And all the anecdotes and everything in here, Henry, are verifiable with other second and third hand sources, you know.
And it's interesting, yeah, because a lot of things that go on with this book. I mean, all the different individuals that you interviewed, did a lot of them have to go off to the service? Did some of them change up and take different directions? Give us let's take two of the characters and let's kind of elaborate on them and see where we go with that.
The most interesting character to me was one who died in 2001, and I didn't interview him personally, but everybody talks about him. His name was Marv Gou, G-O-U-X. It's a French name, so but pronounced Gou, and he was known as the Intimidator. And what Coach Gou used to do.
Now, their coach, you have the coaches. Now, everybody.
He was the defensive line coach, and Obima played his last 2.5 years on the defensive line. You see.
Okay, so that's the and what? Let's elaborate on that a little bit further.
All right. To begin with, Obima is under the guidance of this coach Marv Gou that everybody knew and respected, and I set the tone for the whole book with Obima and Gou and their relationship by referring to Obima as a young man with a billy goat gruff exterior, yet soft as a lamb's wool heart. That was my own phraseology that I came up with.
You're putting it together. You're putting the narrative together so that way, when somebody reads it, they can kind of get a gist of what, make it up in their own mind of what they think it, looks like, sounds like, kind of get the feel of the day, right?
Yeah, because everybody in the book, I try to have the stream of consciousness about animal analogies and stuff like that.
And some of the analogies, how would you compile that? You said animal analogies.
Well, I took what I took in my mind's eye as an author when I was concocting this, Henry, is I took two ruminant animals who are hoofed ruminant animals, a goat, which has a bad disposition, and a sheep, which has a good disposition, and that exactly describes 6'2", 225-pound at the time Joe Obima, who if you don't know him very well, you're gonna not like him. But once you get to know him, you'll find out the guy would give you the clothes off his back, and it's that way all the way through the book.
And some of the other characters, give us some.
Back to Coach Gou, which
let's get back there.
Okay, all right. There's a situation when they went to play Notre Dame. They hadn't beat them at South Bend in 28 years. Is this a
championship game or what is it?
Okay, the way this is set up, it starts out, the first three chapters, Henry, are the 1967 season. Notre Dame, Oregon State, their only loss, 3-0 on a field goal. And then UCLA, where they were number 2 and UCLA was number 1 going into that game, and they beat UCLA and they won the national championship. They were awarded the consensus national championship by both the AP poll, Associated Press, and the coaches poll, 2 different polls. And with one loss, you say, oh, consensus national champion. Well, what happened is other teams had 1 loss, but they beat the other number 1 teams in the last game of the regular season. Right? And after that, they went into the Rose Bowl against the Big Ten champion, which is the way it was back then, Big Ten versus Pac-8, now Pac-12. Indiana, they beat them 14-3. So the entire season of 11 games, including the Rose Bowl, Henry, they only gave up 90 points.
Now you're a great sports writer. I mean, you do a lot of good stuff. I mean, were you still writing? Okay, let's give us a synopsis or a kind of a relationship to today as opposed to this era. How has it changed when they talk about all these schools? There's a lot of schools now. Big Ten. What are the? Tell me.
There's a lot more politics and political correctness.
Yeah,
right
this
now.
This is what I found according to your book. Your book is a lot more open from back in the day. And so let's kind of go and digress back into the book. I just want to ask that question because, people want to know, how does this relate to that day, and then how does it relate to nowadays?
It's a life's lesson. It's not just a football book, Henry, because Obima has had these things happen in his life that other people have had happen in their lives, but one guy to have everything that's happened, losing 2 siblings before they're finished with their total adulthood to death different ways. His mother died the day after 9/11. She was a patriotic woman, a nurse, and she was the widow of a World War II veteran. Wow. And his father came back to work in a rubber plant.
So he had a lot of trial and tribulations going on
Right.
within his family.
Right, and he lost his fiancee when he was 39 years old.
What
He
happened
didn't-
there?
Well, he was okay. He had his first wife. Unfortunately, she's still alive. Fortunately, but unfortunately, she suffered.
No, but
life is life.
Yeah.
She suffered from severe anorexia.
Oh my gosh.
And one of the people told me if I wouldn't use her name, who was a friend of the family, a female person who's not part of the family, who knew the ex-wife, said that she was, and the mother of his two blood children, birth children, she was 80 pounds and she thought she was fat.
Oh my God.
So it was so bad that the judge in the divorce settlement awarded custody to Joe.
Oh my gosh.
And that's very rare, especially in
Yeah.
California.
In that day and age too.
Right, right. And he was 39 years old, and he met a woman exactly the same age who had two almost grown children herself. And he took those kids under his wing. He wound up with a blended family of 7 children, 2 of his own, 3 of his eventually 3 of his second wife, and 2 from his fiancee. So there are 7 kids in this blended family. They all consider him their father.
We're going to take a station identification. We are KUHS Radio and TV, Denver, Colorado. We're streaming live on www.kuhsdenver.com. If you want to catch a visual, you have to turn down the radio portion of the audio down so you can catch the visual. It carries audio and visual. The instructions are right to the side of it, so you can't mess that one up. So get online, check it out if you can. If not, stay tuned to us. We're on KUHS Radio, also simulcast streaming. We're UHS World Communications, based here in Denver, Colorado. And everybody listening around the world, wherever we pick up, we'd like to do a big shout out. We're talking to Mr. Phil Ross, a book on Once a Trojan, Always a Trojan, a true story. And we're going to continue right now with Mr. Phil Ross. Okay, let's finish up with some of this stuff. Let's talk more about Joe Obima and some of his other friends. Let's name them all off and then kind of give a view. I know you got a great memory. I mean, you're a writer. I mean, you're a sports writer, so you know what you're writing about.
Thank you.
And it's been interesting. I mean, just over the phone, our emails back and forth. That was really awesome. I said, man, I've got somebody really good here to come in and share an awesome book. So go ahead and talk to us more about the different individuals that we have on board.
Well, you have a number of former, either dead or alive, unfortunately again, NFL head coaches. No particular order. Wayne Fonts, who is the winningest head coach in the history of the Detroit Lions, he's retired down in Florida now. I interviewed him personally. You were asking me how I interviewed him and who I interviewed. I did all these interviews by phone interviews.
Wow.
And it takes time. I did over 60 interviews.
And you've got to arrange the
family and
timing.
friends.
Yeah, the timing's
Right.
got to be right so that you can
Right.
catch everybody, and that takes time. Everything takes time. I know that,
They
though.
chase you and you chase them.
Back
That's
and forth,
exactly
yeah. So
correct.
you knew the interview. You know, me and you, we didn't chase each other. We knew what we were both after, so it was quick.
So Wayne Fonts would be one. Mike Holmgren, I didn't interview
Everybody knows
personally.
Mike. Yeah, you
but-
know Mike. I love Mike. Yeah. He was
Well,
great.
Joe Obama was in what's
Chicago
called
Bears,
Pardon?
Chicago Bears, Mike Holmgren.
No, he was the Green Bay Packers Super Bowl coach.
Oh, that's
Wound
right.
up in
Yeah, that's
Seattle
right,
as the coach and the president, and his last job was 2 years ago with the Cleveland Browns as the president.
I
And
remember that,
they
yeah.
had an ownership change, and he had to leave basically. So he's basically retired now. But Holmgren was the quarterback in what they call the Trobabes backfield when Joe Obama and him were freshmen, along with an actor named Red Brown.
Oh, yes.
And
I
a guy
remember.
named Fred Kosigian,
Yes.
who's an orthopedic surgeon in Sacramento, California. They couldn't play varsity ball because Lou Alcindor, who became Kareem Abdul-Jabbar,
Mhm.
was a freshman at UCLA.
Oh,
And the
yeah.
NCAA made a rule for both football and basketball and
you
other
couldn't-
varsity
Yeah, I
sports
remember that.
that they couldn't play
Play both,
varsity.
yeah.
So Obama's first varsity year was as a sophomore. That's what I was going to tell you earlier.
And some of the other coaches, let's make sure and get those all.
Some of the other, Jim Hannafin, who's still alive and kicking and had a,
Live and
grant.
kicking.
well, he's 80 something.
Yeah.
He was a Arizona or the St. Louis Cardinals before they moved to Arizona. Head coach, he was the interim head coach of the Atlanta Falcons, and he won several Super Bowl rings as a line coach and offensive coordinator or something with the Washington Redskins under Joe Gibbs, who's another USC
Alumni.
former
Is he
assistant
alumni?
coach. No, I think he might have gone to another school. He went to Cerritos College in Southern California,
Oh, okay.
but he was an assistant coach there.
Yeah, we're talking to Phil Ross. If you're joining us barely now, Phil Ross has so much to share. I mean, we could just sit here and chit chat the rest of the evening, but we can't. We're going to try to shove everything into 30 minutes, and time is flying, so we're going to try to keep moving on to his story. So let's try to move on into his story because you want to buy this book. I'm going to put it up to the camera here so you can see. It's available on Amazon. Once a Trojan, always a Trojan. Phil Ross. Make sure and pick that book up if you've got some time, or download it, or do whatever you need to do. Get that bought right now. Phil Ross. Let's continue on with Phil Ross here on KUHS Radio and streaming TV worldwide.
If you have a lot of people who like prize fighting or mixed martial arts and stuff, they would love this book simply for that reason alone, because one of the things that Joe Obima did when he already had his bachelor's degree in marketing from USC in hand. He was trying to go for his teaching certificate, raise his kids as a single father, going to bed real early and getting up real early, like 4 a.m., 5 a.m., go to bed at 10 or 11 p.m. and so forth. And he got a job as a bouncer. I should say jobs plural because he was in several different places. But the one place that he really enjoyed bouncing was for 2 years in a club owned jointly by Clint Eastwood,
Oh my God.
Dick Smothers, and Jack King, who was the General Bull Fulbright on the A-Team television series, which was popular.
And that's interesting. That's interesting to know this. Now, did they? Was the club? Was there a lot of celebrities going to the club? Yeah, that's probably why. I really enjoyed that part of it too.
Yes, Henry. It was in a place called El Porto, which anybody who's either visited Southern California and gone around, or who lives there now or before, knows about. It's in Manhattan Beach.
Now, Phil, have you lived in Southern California?
Yes,
So you know the area.
I graduated from high school in Southern California, and my first 2 sports writing jobs, even in high school, when I started writing for money.
And you've probably, because you're
California, Orange County.
Yeah, your writing capabilities are, to me, I think top shelf. So it's good stuff. And we do have a sports show here, and we do have some really some interesting stuff because they cover all the running in all of Colorado. They cover the Broncos. They cover the Nuggets, and some of the other sports.
I covered the Broncos for 2 years actually.
Oh, what did you think? Now the Broncos. There's been variables, and let's touch up a little bit on it and how it relates back to this Trojan story. And what do you think now that we've got all the variables here in Denver with, some like the, Peyton Manning story, some don't. Some think he puts up Star Wars numbers, others think, oh, okay, we could have used somebody else because this ain't getting nowhere. We're doing some serious losses. How do you feel as a sports writer? Give us a little clue on that, and let's get back to the Trojan story. But we need to know from a sports writer, how do you feel about that?
I was a sports writer, and I did other newspaper jobs, but I'm still kind of a fan type. I'm not a guy who played college football, and I look at it that way. Joe Obima, on the other hand, will tell you that he looks at it as a coach.
From the coach standpoint of how they're coaching this team, how they're getting it going, what they're doing right or wrong, or what's the problem out there? How come we see that they were the hottest team in the NFL, and they go and meet up a super team that just spanked them? How would you put that into words? How does it relate to once a Trojan, always a Trojan? What's the variables?
Well, John Fox is a Southern California raised.
Yeah, see this
in San Diego.
Yeah,
there's a lot of San Diego anecdotes in this book, so people
and you brought it
to that too. But John Fox is a very nice man. I don't know him personally, but you can tell that the players love him and everything else. However, John Fox is not a very good head coach. He has a lot of players,
and as a sports
they can go to a certain and from a sport. The other sports writers who I talk to will tell you the same thing
because they're visual and they.
But we didn't play. We didn't play.
Irregardless, you see. You have stats, and you know what stats are. You compile information to decipher what's good, what isn't. This story with Joe Obima, I mean, that's real stuff. He was a tough dude.
All this is real stuff. All this stuff happened to this one guy, either directly or indirectly. That's what I found fascinating. I sat down with him for 14, 15 hours and tape recorded.
And where does he live now? Did you tell us where he lives?
Yeah, he lived all his life in Southern California. And then at the last year of this golf tournament for foster children that he was sponsoring, he moved to Las Vegas. And then he couldn't sponsor the golf tournament anymore. He did it for 10 years. Then he moved to Texas to be close to his second wife of 25 years. They're her kids.
Mhm.
They're his stepchildren, and they're all real close. He lives in Taylor, Texas,
Now,
outside
do you
Austin
still
right
stay in
now.
touch with Joe?
Right, but he doesn't like the humid climate and so on and so forth. He's used to the dry
Yeah.
heat like Las Vegas and
And
California.
do you still stay in touch with Joe?
Oh yeah,
You
I
guys
just
talk.
saw him.
Did
I
you
just
tell
saw
him?
him
Hey,
about
did you
2
tell?
weeks ago.
Did you tell him that we're going to be on talking about it?
No, I will. No,
You gotta
I'll
tell him,
talk to
and
him
you'll be able
tonight.
to share this video with him because
Right,
this is going to be
I'll
just.
tell him how he can
Log
access
in.
this video.
It's going to be number one. When you get online, this will be the one sitting there. Right now, we have a Pro Series, but I couldn't get the Pro Series going on, so you may have to click out or listen to one or two of the commercials before his video airs. But it's right. It's the number one, so he'll get to see it. So, Joe, a big shout out to you. This is an interesting story written by Phil Ross here at KUHS Denver. And if you're streaming live, remember to turn your radio down because you'll see video and audio. Same goes to when you rerun it, which is it's a recorded video of our TV stream right now. Remember to turn down your radio part so you can hear the video completely. It says it right to the left side of the website. So let's continue. We're going to finish up with Phil Ross. We've been having a good time. Such a good sports writer in Denver, and I got a hold of him. We were both ecstatic to talk to each other. We couldn't wait to do it. It's like I was happy. I said, "Wow, yeah, he's going to come in and talk about this awesome book." And how well is your book doing anyway?
Oh, I'm not gonna give out numbers, but it could be doing better, but it's doing all right. I've gotten some really nice reader reviews that people can look at Amazon.com. Some from people I know, some from people I've never heard of before in my life, and that's very flattering and very.
Now, here we were going to do this at the end of the show, and I told you I would. You wrote a couple of other books. You can blast that out there. You can, or you don't.
I'll give you the titles and the.
And that's it. We won't
kind of
digress in it like you said. I'm not going to digress in that because we don't want to talk too much about that stuff.
Henry, I've written 3 books. This one here, they're all nonfiction books. I don't think I'm a novelist. Okay, you got to go into your niche.
You want some real stuff, right?
So this is a life story around a sports narrative. Another book I worked on as the co-author, technically, even though I did the writing research, is called, ready for this? This is called Hating America, the Left's Long History of Despising, parentheses, and Slowly Destroying Our Great Country by former Congressman Tom Tancredo.
And he's a hot potato, right?
Yeah, he likes it too. He likes being a hot potato, or lightning rod is what he calls it. With Phil Ross. So that's currently on Amazon. And when you go in Amazon under Mr. M.R. Phil Ross, my name, in books on Amazon, Mr. Phil Ross in books, you can go right directly to my book page and my author page there. Now, the one I'm really excited about after these two right now, it's not out yet, is called Taking Down a Healthcare Giant. And there's a lot of private and legal issues going on right now, but I've written part of it, and I'm real happy with some of the beta readers I use for feedback and what they've told me about it so far. And it's about a whistleblower who worked for a healthcare company. I won't name the name right now, his name or their name, but everybody will find out. He worked for them for 30 years. He was a mid-level manager. They went in, did some surgery on him that was supposed to be an outpatient procedure. And unfortunately, they poked him with a Wang needle. It's a biopsy needle. And they poked his aorta and his superior vena cava, the little tube that runs up there. And he was gushing blood internally for 6 hours. And he didn't know if he was going to live or die or anything. He wound up in the hospital for 30 days afterwards.
And you've got the book on him. So, Phil, I hate to move you right along, but
he's suing.
I've got my producer looking at me with his eyes. We are out of time. You've been listening to Phil Ross, the Joe Obima story. You can do a shout out to Joe Obima. If you call him, say hi, Joe. You can wave at the camera, and he'll say hi to you. And maybe it's
Joey, Linda. It was good last week, and we'll see you again soon.
And so we're going to conclude this with our author show. It's been awesome. We went with just a single author today because Phil had so much to share with us. And so we thought we could make sure and give him the whole 30 minutes because that was the deal. And so, with that being said, you're listening to www.kuhs Radio in Denver, and we're a UHS World Communication Network, internet radio, and TV, that's streaming TV. So, with that being said, we're going to say goodbye for now, and so long.